Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of the Full Metal Tuxedo podcast. My name is Gregory, your host, of course, and tonight we're going to be finishing up this little mini-series about the Coneheads and the Angels and the Elves and the Giants. All, I keep arguing, different forms of the same species or subspecies of Homo. What they were, though, is not so cut and dry. I've argued in previous videos, on previous podcasts. If you haven't seen my video series on subjects like this, check out the tinfoil helmet playlist on the Armoured Skeptic channel. And I've argued on this podcast as well that because we found Denisovan DNA, which is a Homo denisova, is a type of Homo, a subspecies of human. And they were not only substantially larger than us, so much larger than that the original find, they thought they found parts of bear teeth and bear skeletons. Well, they were also smarter than us because they had developed technologies thousands of years before Homo sapiens had developed similar technologies, like drills to make holes in jewelry, etc. Now, we do know that there was a little bit of complexity further back in Homo sapien history than we originally thought. In Europe, we find somewhere around the 30,000 year mark, 30,000 years ago, really ornate burials, and some there's a variety of them, a variety of different burial traditions, but there was this very interesting sort of shared graveyard that had multiple generations of skeletons, and the outfits that some of these people were wearing were extremely intricate. There were thousands of beads sewn and woven into the outfit, made from different types of bones of animals. And, before that finding, we didn't realize that sapiens were that complex. Well, I'm of the mind that sapiens, though we eventually figured out a lot of this stuff, and I'm sure a lot of it we figured out on our own, that the legacy of humanity is that we stole or learned things from other types of Homo, and then one way or another beat them out evolutionarily, and to the point where we're the only ones left. Now, if you go to different parts of the globe, you'll find different kinds of Homo sapiens, because although we are all of us Homo sapien, depending on our ethnicity and where we're from regionally, we're all a mildly different cocktail of different types of Homo hybrids of all sorts of different types of human. And, let's see, I got a whole list different types of Homo. I never list them all because there's so many. Of course, Homo sapien is us. And then Homo heidelbergensis. That's the one, they kind of look like Klingons. They're the ones that I was sort of arguing last week might have, the Klingons might be a reference to them. And that even though they're genetically distinct from Homo denisovan or Homo denisova, and they're technically a precursor because they think that heidelbergensis evolved before even not only Homo sapien but Homo denisovan and Homo neanderthal. And some have argued that Homo heidelbergensis is also a precursor to those three species of human. But, We don't know that for sure, but we do know that the Homo denisovan is much more genetically similar to the heidelbergensis than any other Homo group is. And that's where I come to the conclusion that because the skull fragments of both that we found are also very similar, that it's possible that there was very little physical distinction between the two. It's possible. I don't know. We don't know. But if there is, then that can explain that third group of elves, the Klingon ones, the corrupt ones, the evil ones, if you will. Did I? Yeah. If you're just tuning into this series now, God, I realize that if you're just tuning in randomly to any of my podcasts, I know that what I'm saying will probably just sound like nonsense. But what I'm referencing is the similarity between the different types of Homo groups and the different types of, species that cohabitated with each other and warred with and against each other in the series Lord of the Rings. And so Heidelbergensis might be more like those Orokai or whatever, those ultra tall people. Anyways, moving on. Homo habilis, that's a little bit more of an obscure Homo group. Again, a little bit more ancient. They usually depict this one as being very ape-like. And I'm not going to make a comment on that. I know that I have said certain types of Homo group, they will add or remove a nose sort of arbitrarily based on what they think. But I don't know. Okay, so then Homo ergaster, that one's a little bit more obscure. Homo rhodensis, Homo naledi, sorry, I'm stumbling over some of these. Homo antecessor, Homo rudolfensis, of course, Homo erectus, again, a much more ancient version of human. They think that the Homo erectus is where those three major human groups came from, or four major human groups, I should say. Homo georgicus. Some of these are actually just individual examples of other types of human groups. Anyways, I wanted to get to the point, of course, and then, of course, the Homo Neanderthal or Neanderthalensis. Homo Neanderthal. So I mentioned that the Homo Neanderthal was coexisting with the Homo denisovan, the ultra-tall, ultra-smart human group. And we know this in Denisovan Cave in Siberia, that, we found their bones together, we found that they were mating with each other, and likely were having, children together, that they had formed some form of hybrid community there. Well, a lot of people have argued that Neanderthal was less impressive than us. And in some ways they were. Depending on who you ask, their average height was considerably shorter than ours, though they were thicker, bigger boned, more muscle, very large brows, likely had very large noses, and were likely stronger than us. They would have been slower, so they would have been less proficient at hunting. And that's the main argument, at least the one that I think lands the best as to how they died out, is that it was literally just competition over hunting, and sapiens are just designed to run. I'm not. I don't know why. I'm not a very good runner. But sapiens in general are very good runners, then outperformed the Neanderthal. So they eventually died out. The other argument is that they sort of blended in together. They cohabitated and created hybrids, and then those hybrids eventually just sort of diluted throughout the rest of the sapiens in those regions, meaning in the Europe regions. And I mean, we do know there are certain sapien groups in Europe that have more Neanderthal than other sapien groups even in Europe as well. I don't know. Like I'll use myself as an example though, is I'm half German and half Irish. But for some reason, according to my DNA results online, I have way less Neanderthal DNA than the average person. I think I've mentioned this before. And I always thought that was really weird. But I think that, you know what, I'm not going to mention all the ethnicities that are sort of associated with it. But some people have connected red-headed people essentially to the Neanderthal, which is possible, though not necessary. It's possible that the red-headed feature evolved individually in each Homo group, or the red-headed gene goes further back than people realize, because there seem to be red-headed sapiens, red-headed Neanderthals, and red-headed Denisovan hybrids, right? And the one thing that sort of connects all of them together that we know for sure is that they're all usually fairly pale, though with examples that we have with the cone heads in Peru, that's not always the case. We know that sometimes they can still end up with very dark skin. And I wonder if that's also just a generational thing, because the longer, you know, that they would have been interbreeding with sapiens, the more they would have been diluting their own bloodlines, because they would have treated themselves like royals. We know this from the legends and everything, that they were, as either they demanded to be treated like royalty or like gods, or something in between. And that's why a lot of the terms that we use for that class of human sort of references godlike things, like the Elohim or angels were some of the words that we use to describe these people. Messengers of God, the sons of God were the really tall ones. So, okay. I'm kind of I'm on the fence here. I almost started this episode off by saying that I think it's going to be a short episode, and I'm really glad I didn't say that, because I have so much to say, and I can't even remember what order I want to say it in now. So what's going to be more dramatic? What's going to be more fun for you guys? Okay. Yeah, okay. I'll get to you know what? I'm going to get to the mummy. If you follow me on YouTube, I live stream these to Armoured Gregory, and usually I'll post there right before the live stream starts an image of what we're talking about. And I posted an image of what looks like an alien mummy. It's a mummy that was found in Peru. In Nazca. And to be more specific. So, and it looks somewhat cone-headed. And what's weird about it is that it has 3 fingers, 3 digits on each hand and on each foot. And not only that, but the digits are extremely long. But you know what? I'm going to build up to that. Okay. So, in the same way that I've mentioned in earlier episodes, that these sons of God, the giant, either Denisovan or Denisovan hybrids that came down from the mountains and started teaching things to humanity. You know, we have stories like this literally all around the world. Australia, Canada, the Middle East. We have stories like that in the Bible, stories like that in other religions. And then, of course, the books, or Book of Enoch, the Book of the Watchers. It's also possible that we were learning things from the Neanderthal. So the Neanderthal was much, this is what I'm getting at, is the Neanderthal was much smarter than people give him credit for. So, like I said, they get kind of a bad rap, and that's not totally unearned, because they probably were sort of, I mean, obviously, because they're a different type of human, they would have been very socially different from us. And I mean, we have enough problems getting along, like the races getting along with our mild social differences. So I'm sure that the social differences with other human groups would have been much more difficult. But these guys were also kind of annoying. This is what they think they sounded like.
Let's try male human voice, count over 3.
1, 2, 3.
Just pitch up your voice.
1, 2, 3.
Let's just add a bit of nasal now.
1, 2, 3.
Now, the other thing that would be happening, which would actually increase that quality, is a very heavy skull that seems to pull down into the throat there. Now, speak.
1, 2, 3.
Now let's make a sound. Just let's make a huge R.
The poor Neanderthal. Plus, you know, with their slightly shorter status, the fact they couldn't hunt as well, the fact they were culturally different, and, you know, they were essentially taken over by Cro-Magnon, which Cro-Magnon is really just one example of a sapien that existed back then. Also, might I add, much taller than the average human is today, but, you know, I digress. People also just assume they were dumber. Do they deserve that? Their brain capacity was somewhere around 10-20% larger than us. And people, including myself, will often argue that doesn't mean they were smarter. However, they actually were smarter. You know, they might have been kind of annoying, but they were smarter than us. Last year, an article was released talking about how they created an inverse counting system where archaeologists, they found these weird balls of twine that seemed to be designed to be unraveled in a specific way that showed a basic understanding of math. They were not just like counting devices, but they were almost like these rudimentary calculators. And recently, earlier this month, I think it was, yeah, the 2nd of June, a bunch of articles dropped talking about how they found these notches in bones in Neanderthal caves. And they are pretty confident that this suggests some form of rudimentary early counting system. And this bone is somewhere around 60,000 years ago that it was, you know, that it was killed. The animal was killed 60,000 years ago. And what's amazing about that is that actually means that they learned to count before us. You know, and but you know, that's the answer modern science has, right? Is modern science says that you know, humanity, even though humanity started somewhere around 250,000 years ago, that we're to believe that all of intellectual knowledge started somewhere around 40 to 50,000 years ago. But technology as we know it didn't even really start until, what, 6,000 years ago. And I don't mean like simple technologies like drills and hammers, and I mean that like technologies that can actually create civilizations. So I sort of reject the idea that humanity wasn't able to count before 60,000 years ago. But that being said, it does show that Neanderthal, at very least, was way smarter than we give them credit for. And I'm willing to believe that those examples of those intricate burials, with the beads and everything, that perhaps what we sort of see somewhere around the 30,000 year ago mark, where, Neanderthal is starting to die off. There's a lot of hybrids that seem to be popping up in the fossil record, and humanity, sapiens, are sort of taking on a stronghold in Europe. That there's no reason to believe that some of those cultural phenomenon, like the intricate bead designs and stuff like that could have been adopted by Neanderthal, and that's why we see sort of interesting things like that in Europe at that time that we're not seeing in other parts of the world. So eventually in my tinfoil helmet series, I don't want to give away too much, because there is some really, really, really interesting stuff that I'm building up to and revealing in that series. But okay, one really important event is I sort of associate Göbekli Tepe with the moment when the angels or the sons of God came down and interacted with humans. Now, when that was exactly or whatever, I'm going to sort of pick that apart a little bit, because the conspiracy theory community, the alternate history community, all those people, they all are pretty sure that it represents a post-flood, post-Noah's flood, post-global flood sort of event, that big disaster that happened in the Younger Dryas, where the ocean just suddenly rose and then lowered again when all the ice just rapidly melted and refroze, killing a good deal of the megafauna in Canada, changing the ocean level forever, supposedly destroying Atlantis, all that, blah, 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 all that stuff. So, the Bible says that there were giants before, in that time, and then also after that. And what they mean by also after that is that they survived. Some of them survived the flood, a small portion of them. And they would have had to have, otherwise, stories like David and Goliath wouldn't have happened. There were supposedly lots of giants among the Canaanites. And you remember the Canaanites, the sons of Cain, I was saying, are related to the... the Klingon group of Homo. What was that? Heidelbergensis. God, I named too many humans. Yeah, Heidelbergensis. But what were the sons of God, though? And this is going to be sort of a fun thing to sort of reveal, is that, okay, so in the Bible, humans are sort of, sapiens as we know them. We're so full of ourselves that we think even the Bible, talking about the creation of man, Adam and Eve or whatever, people are so damn sure Adam and Eve are the first humans and that we all come from them. Not to not to burst too many people's bubbles here, but that's absolutely not what the book of Genesis is saying. Adam and Eve, the story of their creation and the creation of the Garden of Eden, comes after the part of the story in Genesis where God creates humanity. God creates all of humanity before he creates Adam and Eve. And then he creates Adam and Eve as special people that, Adam has the Spirit of God breathed into him. So Adam is essentially like, you know, no different from Jesus essentially, because he is the Son of God, has the Spirit of God or whatever in him. And then Eve is created from Adam. So arguably she also has the same Spirit of God. That sets them apart from humanity. And so the sons of Adam would have been the sons of God, as the sons of Cain were known as the sons of Cain. So the angels, the Denisovan, that line are supposedly the ones that came from Adam and Eve, not sapiens. That being said, though, like I've suggested, that we're all sort of weird hybrids. And because we know that we have found Denisovan DNA in specific groups, like natives in South America, different groups in the island chain above, like north of Australia, also the Australian Aboriginals and the Filipino island chain, that whole area, but also in Siberia, and different areas. And okay, so this is the part. This is the part, though, that I guess I can sort of lead into the weird mummy. So, okay, what is really interesting, though, is that in a lot of these same groups, as well as other groups that don't have Homo Denisovan DNA fragments in their code, there seems to be yet another undiscovered Homo species in the mix that many of us have as well. And this is something I've sort of avoided talking about in all my other Conehead videos and Giant videos, because I love sort of the simplicity of having the giant species of Denisovan represent the giant humans, because that's so poetic and simple and tied up with a neat little bow. But this also yet undiscovered species of human could represent a lot of the different features that we see, including the cone head. So maybe, even though I realize I'm sort of throwing the conclusions I've come to in the previous episodes of this podcast about all of them being different forms of giants, that perhaps some of these different forms of non-sapien humans, or the hybrids that represented these different royal families and ruling classes and god classes of people, perhaps they actually come from this other species of human instead. And it also brings into question that what kind of associations we have with other types of ape. So our closest living relative right now is the chimpanzee. Something like 98% of their genome we share with them. It's a really high number, something ridiculous like that. Well, these other groups of Homo, obviously, we would have been even more closely related to them than that. And which would have made it very likely that we could have interbred with all of them. So I always bring this up in every episode, that the hybrids that would have appear from them, the hybrids that would have come, out of the union of two different types of Homo, might not be so cut and dry, might not be so intuitive. You might assume that they might come out with sort of a muted version of each version of humans' features, but they might end up coming out with completely unique features that neither Homo has. So I want you to... Oh no, where did I put it? So I want you to look up this this alien mummy, this Nazca mummy. If you haven't already looked it up, I'm sure you've had time here. So it's a really, really interesting find. But okay, there's a lot of sketchy stuff about it. So it's all like, it's pure chalk white, and it's, I don't know if it's literally chalk, but it's covered in like a coating. The mummy is in a fetal position, sitting upright, which was the most common burial position in South America, in Peru, Nazca, all those areas. We find lots of cone-headed mummies and skeletons, as well as normal, regular humans with red hair, blonde hair, all buried in that same way. So, and then its head is also somewhat cone-shaped, somewhat canonical. And okay, I know that I promised in previous episodes that I was going to tell you what the name for that when something has a somewhat cone-shaped head. It's dolococephalic. So it has a dolococephalic skull. Now, that cone is not nearly as large or pronounced as some of those larger examples we also find in Peru. It's sort of not really all that impressive a cone shape. In fact, there are several modern examples of people with skulls that shape, and all throughout history we find that same dolococephalic shape. North America, South America, Middle East, everywhere. One example, I want you guys also to look up the Kenwick man. So the Kenwick man is a really interesting skull. It's somewhere, some ridiculous age, somewhere around 9,000 years old. Ridiculous, right? Found in North America. And it, I mean, for lack of a better description, sort of looks like a vampire skull. This one in particular is connected to native groups that live in North America today. But this exact skull shape is not unique to natives, and is not unique to that region. There's a lot about this skull. If you're fans of Star Trek The Next Generation, you might notice looks kind of like Captain Picard. You just add a really big nose and some big ears, and that's basically his skull. I mean, my skull's not really too differently shaped. Some of those dramatic features I also have on my skull. The exactly 90-degree angles on the jaw, for example, I have that. The sort of pointy ridges, like almost like claws that stick out of some of the parts, I also have that. It really does look exactly like Captain Picard, honestly. That is also a dolococephalic skull. So arguably you could say Captain Picard as a dolococephalic skull. I'm not going to say that word anymore. Dolococephalic skull. I don't know that you would say. I don't know that I do, though. I don't know if my skull literally comes to that cone shape in the back. I do have this weird nub on the back, though. But this one skull, though, in the Back to the Mummy. God, it always turns into stories about me. The mummy in the Nazca mummy. So, okay, it sort of shows up from this sketchy grave robber shows up with it, as often happens in Peru, because the government doesn't regulate that shit. They don't police it. They don't stop it. Grave robbers will just show up with these crazy skulls, crazy skeletons, crazy mummies. They won't say where they found them because they don't want other people to find their golden eggs and their golden goose. And the people that end up getting these things turned into them too, even though they'll often be considered experts, especially by their constituents, arguably a lot of these guys are hucksters and swindlers and stuff. A lot of people that are in, I always bring that up, careful of where, your sources for this information, stuff on giants and cone heads and, previous forms of human that cohabitated with us or whatever, that often it's propaganda. A lot of it is, white supremacist propaganda. Some of the writers are literally Nazis. Just be careful where you're getting this information from. Well, in the same way with the conehead community too, it's just like a lot of people in it are not exactly in it for the right reasons. We'll just put it that way. So it's hard to trust them. So the people that presented this chalk white mummy with the dolichocephalic skull were among some of the least trustworthy people in like the paranormal community ever. Often found to be hoaxing things or perpetuating hoaxes. And of course the mummy looks sort of like an alien. So these assholes are trying to tell us that it's an alien. That's what we're still dealing with, this alien crap. Swear to God, people. And I'm going to be 100% honest. I didn't believe it when I first saw this thing. Specifically because of who it was that presented it. And the fact that, its origin was so sketchy. I just assumed that they had sort of cobbled together some different skeletal fragments that they found, and they pasted it together themselves into this chalk coating to stick it in together to make it look like it's one cohesive individual being, and tried to make it look like an alien as much as possible. And really the long fingers are the part that make it look most like an alien. So forensic science finally did its due diligence on this thing, and it turns out that I was wrong. This thing is real. And by that I mean there's nowhere in the x-rays and the CAT scans and all the tests that they've done it, there's nowhere where they can find obvious places where different skeletons could have been mashed together. It is pretty cut and dry, pretty clear from these scans that this thing, whatever it was, whatever type of human it was real. It lived, it breathed, it died, and it was properly mummified as a single piece, and whoever it was that found it did not hoax it. But, oh no. No. The archaeologists disagree. Surprise, surprise, right? Archaeology says that thing can't exist because we don't have any other examples of it anywhere. It's not real. And of course, here's the thing. It looks like an alien. Therefore, whoever it was that created it with the express purpose of making it look like an alien. Under no circumstances do they accept the possibility that this thing could have been a living, breathing, earthbound creature that was born and died here on Earth with Earth DNA. No. According to the archaeologists, it looks too much like an alien. Therefore, it's not real. So we've been over this 1,000 times now on the podcast and the tinfoil helmet series. These things are not aliens. That much I agree with the archaeologists. They're not aliens, absolutely. But they are real. So why this thing has extra long fingers, I can only speculate. Perhaps it is representative of this yet undiscovered species of Homo that we have traces of but we can't find. Maybe this species of Homo just had really long digits, really long fingers and toes. It wouldn't be the only primate or hominid that does. There are several different species of monkey and ape that have extremely long fingers. Now, the fact that it only has 3 fingers and we can't seem to find a 4th finger and we can't seem to find a thumb is really strange. It does make it drastically different from Homo sapiens, though there is no reason to believe that it always had 3 digits and it might have had more. I don't know. That is the one part I'm having the most trouble getting my head around. That is the part that still makes me wonder if there isn't some sort of hoaxing going on or some sort of manipulation. It could also be representative of some sort of a birth defect, which would also explain why, which I forgot to mention, the thing also doesn't seem to have ears. So that's the other weird part. But who knows? Maybe this thing had a birth defect or a series of birth defects. I don't know. Maybe it lost digits. Who knows? Also, the age of this thing is not super clear. It would be interesting to find out that it predates all the Nazca skulls, all the Peruvian skulls, but I would be really surprised if it did. But I'm getting tired of this false dichotomy, this sort of false debate that we're presented in this sphere of study. How it can either only be bound skulls or an alien hoax, and there's nothing in between. This weird aversion to acknowledging that other species of human existed is just, I don't get it. Because I really don't get it. Because it's so logical. I think I've essentially proven that the giants in North America were the Denisovan that came over from Asia and Siberia 25,000 years ago. And I've proven that the coneheads, too, are not sapien. That they have physiological features just on their skulls alone, not even including their skeletons, that sapiens don't have. And that those features can only exist if it's genetic, meaning not sapien, another species of Homo. And because we have so many to choose from, again, I just listed a few examples tonight of different species of Homo. We could be dealing with different cocktails of hybrids. I think that I've been talking long enough about this weird subject. I just want to thank my patrons for supporting this podcast. The Full Metal Tuxedo Patreon, link in the description. There's also a Full Metal Tuxedo Discord. I know that some of you guys have been following along in the chat here. Live stream insiders, they get to do their super chats in my Discord. And Double D. Double D says, if you mean Kenwick, it's pronounced Kenwuk. At least I think so. Okay, thank you, Double D. And Shakisian says, Three Fingers does strike me as seriously lacking for something advanced enough to be a hominid. Even rodents have that figured out. 2 points for the alien theory. Yeah, that is a good point. The fact that it does have less digits is really worrying because very few mammals in general have less than 5. Even ones that only have 4 usually have some sort of vestigial 5th digit dangling off of like their wrist or their ankle or something. And Double D says that he might have been the one who invented bowling. You're absolutely right. I should have considered that. Yeah, I always forget to bring up the super chats when we do this. Sorry to drag this on. So anyways, yeah, I'm looking forward to sort of talking about the sons of God, these different species of Homo that cohabitated with us, that taught us everything. And just remember, like, the legends from around the world. I've given examples of them teaching in different places, Canada, Australia, Middle East, everywhere in between. Göbekli Tepe, obviously a perfect example of this. So there's obviously, though, these people were not a homogenous group. They would have had different cultures, different traditions. So they would have had maybe even different motives when they traveled around the world. But each of these different groups seems to be famous for sailing around, and literally sailing around and teaching people around the world things. And we're talking about sailing before Homo sapiens can even efficiently canoe, let alone travel across the ocean. The giants did this. The angels did this. The elves did this. The coneheads did this. And eventually, and this is the really weird theory that I don't have properly figured out yet, but remember how I mentioned in the tinfoil helmet series that several groups culturally identified with the coneheads one way or another. And a lot of them did so by adorning long cone-shaped headwear that, if one were to have a cone head, would perfectly hide their head, suggesting that entire armies of these groups were cone head. Whether or not they literally were, is sort of irrelevant. It does show at least that those cultures came from that tradition, and that they at one point, if not still today, are ruled by people who are descended from them. Just as, many of us could still be descended from them today. Even people that don't show this Denisovan DNA or mystery Homo, whatever this mystery Homo group is, whatever their DNA is, whatever their features were like. That's the really confusing part. And again, like I've said, with the way that hybrids could end up coming out with features that are not typical of either Homo group that the parents come from, I guess it doesn't ultimately matter in the end what features this mystery Homo group had. But I think, it probably does. It would be interesting to find out. It would be interesting to find out if they had similar features to this 3-fingered, 3-toed man that we found in Nazca. But anyways, the theory that I'm sort of working on is that the Phoenicians, because they were one of these groups that showed off with the cone-shaped heads, the Phoenicians are famous as the Sea People. Most people know them as the Sea People. The Phoenicians, because their tradition is nearly identical to the Coneheads, with their traveling around trading and teaching that I think that the Phoenicians are one of the later groups of survivors or whatever you want to call them that continued that tradition, that whatever that culture was, at least one of those giant conehead angel elf cultures. God, I sound like the craziest fucking person on the internet. I hope that works for me. I really love this show. I'm never gonna stop doing this. Oh God. Okay. Sorry, I'm bringing up the super chats now. I'm dragging my heels tonight. I'm gonna have to do a lot of editing on this. Speaking of which, speaking of editing, when I'm done these episodes, I edit them down a little bit just to make them a little bit more streamlined. And I upload them onto Armoured Skeptic More, which is a different YouTube channel. It's really just an archive of different stuff. Right now, it's mostly just episodes of the podcast, but there'll be other stuff on that channel, Armoured Skeptic More. And I live stream them onto the Armoured Gregory YouTube channel. Okay, well, we've got one super chat. Thank you, Barrett Privateer. Oh, very generous. Do you think that the bad guys from World War II went to South America at all because of those theories on eugenics and types of humans, etc., since South America seems to have so many conehead people? I wouldn't be surprised if the reason they went to Argentina, those bad people, because there is a connection to that culture there. So the famous symbol, the black, the famous symbol that the bad guys from World War II use. That same symbol is also found in South America. It seems that whatever this Aryan group is literally did use the swastika as their symbol. I'd love to do an episode one day talking about the meaning of the symbol, because there's so many different theories as to what it could mean. So I wouldn't be surprised if they fled to South America because they were so into the occult stuff, and they were so into the whatever you want to call them, the alien human hybrids, the human hybrid people. That's why they went to Tibet. And even though they didn't find them, in a very similar cave in Tibet is the bad guys from World War II went to Tibet during World War II to sort of find these. They thought that there was an entrance to the inner Earth where some of these survivors, these either human hybrids or Denisovans, still existed. I don't know what they called them. I can't remember what they called them. They didn't find them or this entrance or fossils, but in a very similar cave also in Tibet is the second location where they found Denisovan remains. Similar to the Denisovan cave in Siberia, it was mostly just jaw and teeth parts. But it was enough to sort of piece together what these things were like. Again, very large. Very, very large in their earlier days. Okay. Yeah. And again, check out Samtar. I'm going to play another Samtar song for you while I take a quick little break to rest my voice, and then I'm going to come back with viewer stories. You guys remember how that works? You can send me an email to fullmetaltuxedo@gmail.com, and I read people's fancy first-hand and second-hand accounts of strange and unexplained things that have happened to them, very much like an episode of Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. I've got some great examples for you tonight. Yeah. So check out Samtar's YouTube channel. This guy's pumping out music like crazy right now. Great musician. Absolutely love his stuff. And I've talked to him too about having him on as a guest co-host on one episode. So we'll see how that works out too, because if he's good, we might keep him on. So that'll be fun. Okay, we're back. I hope you all went to the potty, because we're about to party. Yeah. All right, viewer stories. So just to finish up, a couple more comments here. So Sir Hamilton in my Discord here says, a lot of ancient art have a lot in common, images, dragons, etc., which is true, and I don't think that that's a coincidence. I don't think that those kinds of similarities in art come from nowhere. There had to have been, or at least there's much more likely some sort of a cultural connection that, you know, informs all of those groups of those images, or there was either that or there was something globally different. Like maybe those kinds of things existed everywhere before, which is a harder sell. But and then he finishes up by saying that over 200,000 bad guys and Germans from World War II went to South America, which is crazy. Yeah, 200,000 is an insane number. And there are still German towns in the jungle down there. Well, there are still, yeah, there's still entire towns of people who are openly German. You know, sometimes the CIA or the Israeli secret service, or sorry, intelligence agency, they'll pick people out of there every once in a while, but for the most part the people are left alone down there. And then Nuke the Ice Caps says, you might find that the caves in the Grand Canyon quite interesting if they're still available. You have to actually talk firsthand with the native tribes these days. The stories are impressive, but for some reason increasingly hard to verify the existence of the caves, never mind their purposes. It's really interesting you bring up the caves in the Grand Canyon and, you know, that whole region. So people have argued that the Coneheads and the Giants or whatever, that they had some sort of civilization functioning in the Grand Canyon. And there are multiple stories of people finding a litany of artifacts in these caves in the Grand Canyon, including things that look like they're supposed to be from Egypt or straight up are from Egypt. Again, suggesting, as I've argued many, many times before, that the Coneheads are the authors of the Egyptian culture. Yeah. And then, okay. Yeah. So that's enough super chats for now. So we're going to get into a couple of viewer stories is what we call them here. So this one's really short to start off here. So JC, I'll call you, says, "Hey man, been a while since I told one of my occurrences. This is a short one about what I believe to be a succubus to this day." So I find the whole idea of the succubus really interesting, guys. I know I've brought this up a couple times. The idea of this demon that usually depicted as a woman, but there's a male version as well that sort of sucks people's energy one way or another, usually through love and passion and sex. Okay, so JC says, "When I was living at my parents' house, I had a repetitive dream for about a week. It starts with me walking through a beautiful forested area, lush green leaves. The way the sun looked, it appeared to be the morning time in the dream. After walking for a bit, I came across a clearing or a field of sorts. The edge was a old barn. Out of curiosity, I approached the barn, and as I get closer, I could hear what seemed to be music. I make it to the barn, and the music is beautiful. Wanting to see where the music is coming from, I peeled between the boards and saw a giant snake craving on the floor. Snake carving, I'm assuming is what he meant, on the floor. For some reason, I decided to go into the barn. At the other end of the barn, there was a beautiful woman playing a harp. After this, I approach the woman, but as I get close enough to touch, I wake up. This happened every night. After the third night, I woke up and I find a blonde hair, same as the woman from the dream, on my chest. This happened for a week. As strange and as fast as the dream came, it stopped. And to this day, I wonder if it was really a succubus. Well, that's a really interesting story. The dream on its own is really interesting. I'm not a huge fan of dissecting dreams in general. Even my own dreams. I'll very rarely bring up my own dream. I just don't find them. I mean, while they're happening, I'm enjoying them, but while I'm sober and awake, they sort of feel unimpressive to me. But this dream in particular does seem really interesting because those are really specific details and to see that multiple nights in a row is really strange. And yeah, this like beautiful woman playing music and singing, I don't know though you could call it a succubus. Nothing about it necessarily suggested she was a succubus. There is like this cultural idea of the harpy. And then of course the mermaid. And both of them are known to be able to use song to lure usually men to their doom. And it sort of sounded similar to that. But yeah, what really sells this story to me, of course, is waking up with a blonde hair on your chest, reminding you of the woman in your dream. Yeah, I've never woken up with the blonde hair on my chest, so I can't comment on how that would feel. But if you had that dream 5 nights in a row, though, and if you're suggesting that, yeah, on what you said the last night, you saw that blonde hair, I think that would really scare the crap out of me, to be honest. Okay. This next one, oh, I should take a drink of water here. Is from Kate. Hey, Greg. I go by Kate, or Kat, of course. I love the show and the live streams, but I don't want to stroke your ego too much. Haha. Oh, damn it, Kate. You started off so strong. You have to stroke my ego a little bit. I mean, guys, come on. It's my sustenance. Okay, so Caitlin says, I've been contemplating sending these in for a while, but I got the courage to do so. I'll go ahead and begin with the most prominent paranormal encounter. Oh, a little preface about myself. I've been a practicing pagan witch for 10 plus years, meaning I do witchcraft spell work. But I don't follow Wicca, as I work with different pantheons of gods, deities, as a pagan. So that's really interesting. I'm glad I can go into a little side note here, because you know that I have a few friends and acquaintances that are into witchcraft, different forms of it, left path, right path, dark, light. I even know one that calls herself a black witch, though. She's not as scary as she says she is. But then the whole pagan thing, too. So pagan rituals, to somebody who, doesn't know anything about the whole concept of witchcraft, you wouldn't really be able to distinguish the two. There's a lot of similarities, and honestly, the energy is the same. You know, like the idea is the same, but as this person pointed out, they use different deities and gods. So ultimately, that's the only difference, is it's a different path. But yeah, I'd love to go into that at some point. Okay, so that being said, I was staying with my parents and decided to put up words in the old room while for a while I was there. Sorry, the writing is a little bit broken. So something just felt off. So to be better, you know, better than safe than sorry, yeah, she put up some sort of like a spell to protect the room. And earlier they were decorating for Yule, which, if you don't know, Yule is like a version of Christmas. Similar to Christmas, it's usually celebrated around the same time. A lot of the traditions of Christmas come from Yule. That's another thing I'd love to talk about sometime. The whole like thing of the Holly King and yeah, all that. I want to get into all that pagan. This person is legitimately pagan. I'll put it that way. So at this point, it's past dusk. My parents went to church, so I was home alone and had my laptop set up in my room for digital art. I took a break to stretch, and out of the corner of my eye, I see a solid black shape around where my door frame blocked out the illuminated hallway. I immediately turn and look directly at whatever it is, and I see a child-sized apparition, literally, and I mean literally, peeking its head into my room before ducking away as soon as its eyes locked onto it, as soon as my eyes locked onto it. So, okay, Kate, what you just described there is a classic, perfect example of a shadow person. I cannot tell you. This is shadow people is the other thing that comes up in every episode of the podcast, isn't it? But I cannot tell you the number of times that exact thing happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I see something dark. I turn and look directly at it. I see a vivid, clear shape of a person. And then at the second my eyes stop moving and I'm looking right at it, it darts away. And that's the really interesting thing. It never disappears. It never fades away. It always darts off. It always moves away. And everyone says that that's what happens when you see a shadow person. Okay, so Kate continues. I clearly saw the form of shoulders, neck, and a head, but no features. Going back to mentioning the wards earlier, the ward. The ward is a type of spell. It physically could not step into the room due to the ward protection, and I was very specific in the intention that any ancestors, kind spirits, or benevolent energies were welcome, but that malevolent entities could not even enter. Okay, so I'm glad that you bring that up. That kind of gave me goosebumps reading it, even though I don't totally believe in that kind of thing, the type of magic you're talking about. You do have every reason to believe that the figure was nefarious, especially if it identified itself as a child. And this, again, I'm sure this is something I bring up often. That figures, ghosts, apparitions, these spirit beings, I'm very skeptical of the idea that at very least the vast majority of them are dead humans, and that most of them are, in fact, some sort of other thing that exists as a spirit being, that exists just outside of our vibrational state, our dimension, however you want to put it. It exists just outside of our ability to detect it. And that the specific phenomenon of shadow people, it seems pretty much universal that they are evil or nefarious. And ones that identify as children, they do so to make you more likely to sympathize with them. They come across as less evil looking, less scary. You might be nice to them. You might treat them like a child. You might empathize for them, when in fact there's something very dark and evil. Anyways, Kate continues, I called my best friend as soon as my heart recovered, and she came over to stay for a while. I did a cleansing, because even working with spirits and entities, it still freaked me out. LOL. I enjoy doing investigations, but when they come into my space unannounced, and especially bringing malevolence, it's a whole nother level of nope. That's an excellent story, Kate. And she added a couple pictures here of... this might have to do with the second story here. So she continues with the second story. This story is a little shorter, but has more preface. I have... Okay, I have aphantasia, which means I don't have mental imagery. Well, isn't that interesting, Kate, that you have aphantasia, yet you are a digital artist? I really want to understand how that works. So this is something that came up on Twitter a little while ago that fucking freaked the hell out of me. So I have a wildly vivid imagination. And, I know a couple other people that are the same way. And it's a very common thing, specifically with artists, to be... People that live in their heads, like me, often have, extremely powerful ability to create imagery in their head. And somebody brought up this scale with an apple, and on one side of the scale is like a perfect apple, like a photograph of an apple with lighting and shadows and everything. And then, lower down the gradient are like an apple that's been drawn, but it's been drawn really well. And then the next one down is an apple that's been drawn more crudely. And then another one is just like a shadow that's in the shape of an apple. And then the last one obviously is just nothing. And then somebody asked, if you imagine an apple, what do you see in your head? And there were so many people that replied with, people see things in their head? And that's actually terrified me, because before that moment, I had no idea that there were people out there that can't picture imagery in their head. And I guess if you've never had that, you wouldn't know what it's like. But with my vivid imagination and my ability to have vivid dreams too, for example, I would losing that would be like becoming blind, or like losing your sense of smell or taste or something. Like it would be like a wild difference. Okay, I ramble a lot on this show. I hope that's why you guys tune in. Okay, so I still have an imagination, but nothing is super clear or distinct in my mind's eye, for instance. I can think of a shade of green and get a blur of it, but I don't actually see the color in a block. It's like that brief moment after you look at the light and close your eyes, and you can see a flash of color, and you know that it's just an optical illusion. Wow, so like really, really, really dull ability to see in your imagery, in your mind's eye. Okay, very interesting. Okay, so on this day, I was outside in the summer, just enjoying the fresh air, when I decided to close my eyes and just meditate for a minute while listening to a song called Snake Pit Poetry by Wardruna. Okay, that sounds really interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up. After a few minutes of just being all of a sudden there, was sorry. After a few minutes of just being, all of a sudden, there was a perfect circle in the center of my vision, which I thought was odd, but around it was the same static block I always see, but now in a tunneling form against the white circle. And then that's what these images are. You're seeing, she drew these sort of like dark tunnels, almost like a portal, and at the end, you see this like figure, sort of almost like it's somebody looking at her through a portal. Yeah, so with a figure standing in the center holding a staff. When it was like, then it was like an old moving picture, because after a few seconds, the figure turns to the right and walks off into the tunnel, kind of like off a stage with a spotlight. Yet I saw no features, just a silhouette. I've talked to a few others who also practitioners or works with spirits to figure out who I saw, but it's never been fully confirmed to one single entity, but now follow a goddess who I felt I was being drawn to, even if she wasn't the one in the vision. The path led me to her. Wow, that's a fucking fascinating story. Holy shit. To finish up this crazy email, even though I may not seem like it based on my beliefs and spirituality, I'm logically driven and maybe even too analytical of a person for a lot of subjects. So I do want to put that these have been tried and tested for any debunking or scientific explanation. Especially my first story. I spent months trying to debunk that as an illusion, but in the end, there was zero explanation for an opaque figure that just moved and fully blocked out the light when no one was home. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk, and blessed be. All right. That was an excellent thank you, Kate, for those stories. Okay. So I have one from Kat. Kat is a different person from Kate. Kat is actually one of my patrons. So thank you very much, Kat. If you want to join the Full Metal Tuxedo Discord, you have to become a patron. It's a separate Patreon from the Armored Skeptic Patreon. Anyways, she actually recorded audio for me today, so you might have to turn up your speaker a little bit, but this is as loud as I can get it. But here is our story from Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat. That's who I am. I suck at talking, but I'm gonna edit this to make it more concise. So my story is 2020. I saw some weird shit. A little about me is I have never hallucinated, like ever. So keep that in mind. I know that this experience was not sleep paralysis because I have had sleep paralysis since the beginning of high school. I'm 26 now, so I have quite a few years of experience with sleep paralysis. So I know 100% this was not sleep paralysis, and I've never had hallucinations. The most I've ever, the only real circumstance I've actually, hallucinated, seen things that weren't there, was when I had weed for the first time. I had an edible that was, super strong, and yeah, I was hallucinating out the ass. Sometimes when I'm like really, really sleepy, there'll be like tricks of the eye, sort of, where like it sort of looks like the room is moving a little bit, but it's not like, I never like see things, you know? So there's a little history about me. I've never like legitimately like hallucinated, you know? So keeping that in mind, so last year, 2020, I was in bed taking a nap, kind of afternoon, or not, yeah, like in the evening, and the sun hadn't gone down yet when I went to bed. And normally, okay, when I'm in my bedroom, normally when I'm sleeping, I don't like to have the cats out of my bedroom because I'm a pussy and I need to sleep with a light on and have my cats with me. But yeah, so you know, usually I have a light on, but since it was like the sun hadn't gone down yet, I was like, I didn't turn on any lights, so I fell asleep. And then when I woke up, I kind of looked to the side of my bed, and my mattress is on the floor. So, because I don't have a bed frame, because I don't have a lot of money. Yeah, so my mattress is on the floor. All right, woke up. It was dark, but I had one of the lights on in that other room, like outside my bedroom. So there was like just enough light coming from like under the door that I could like see, but it was like dark, you know. Anyway, so I looked to the side of my bed, and like across from me, the other side of the bed, I saw something. I saw a figure that was like maybe 3 feet high, and it was sort of like translucent-y looking, so I like almost didn't notice, you know, but when I saw it, I was like, what the fuck? And you know how when you think back on a memory so many times, trying to remember different details of it, that's sort of like each time that you remember it and think back on it, it kind of gets less accessible. I don't know. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? But from what I remember of this figure, it had a round head and big round eyes, and it was looking at me, and it was like mildly translucent, and I'm not sure, but I think it had like a purplish, bluish kind of tint, just like really mildly. And yeah, it's so anyway, when I noticed this thing, because it was sort of translucent, I was like blinking sort of, because I was like, I don't know, maybe I guess something in my eyes. I don't know. So I was like blinking, and it wasn't going away. There's definitely a thing there, right? And I like slowly like sat up in bed, just locking eyes with this thing. I was like, there's no way this is real. There's no way that this is real right now. And I was like, look, you know how when like birds do that thing, how like birds will like move their heads around because they're depth perception isn't, I don't know. So I was like, am I seeing, like, is this a shadow? What is this? So I was like, I had set up, and I was like moving to get a, for depth perception. And it was like, okay, that thing is not a shadow. It is a thing in my room. What the fuck? And then my like flight response just went like, I started just screaming and ran as fast as I could out of my bed, out of my bedroom, flipped the light switch on, closed the door. I was so fucking freaked the fuck out because there was a fucking thing in my room. And considering that I've never hallucinated anything, I don't see things that aren't there. It had depth perception, like depth, what is the correct phrasing of that? But yeah, like there was depth perception. It was not a shadow, it was a thing looking at me, and it was definitely there. Like there was no way that I could say to myself like, that it was just, I just imagined it or something. It was like, that thing was there. And I was scared, like, I was scared to even open the door again or like look. And I called up my friend and I was telling her, and I was like, she was just like, oh, you just hallucinated, you just saw something. And I'm like, no, like, I don't hallucinate, like, and that thing was there. It was fucking there. A physical thing taking up space in my room. I wasn't seeing things. It wasn't like something in my eye, or I don't even know how you could explain that. Like, I for sure saw this thing. And yeah, but like when I opened my door, I kept her on the phone, and I like opened my door and was like, okay, I don't see anything anymore, so it's gone. She was like, there was nothing there to begin with, you just saw things because you're tired. And I'm like, no, when I'm tired, like, it might look like maybe the room is moving a little bit if I am really, really sleep deprived. I don't literally hallucinate physical, like, things, beings in my bedroom. And it was not sleep paralysis, because I know what sleep paralysis is like, for me at least. And when I've had sleep paralysis, I do not hallucinate. I don't see things. I don't think I even open my eyes when I have sleep paralysis.
Hey, I know, I usually interject a little bit more often in these stories, because this show is really about me. Let's be honest. This is such a good story. So, I'm wondering if you're saying translucent, you couldn't see it, couldn't really tell if you could see it. I think you might mean transparent, though I guess, you know, if there was light in the room and if it was translucent, it would still have a very similar effect. But it sounds sort of like what you're describing as something that was sort of slightly, like, it would have looked like it was either slightly out of phase with reality or not totally tuned into our dimension, or however you want to put it, however a sci-fi writer might put it. And I remember we were probably talking about this on the Discord, but I remember we brought this up in one of our conversations one night, about how certain types of abduction stories make it sound like this spaceship that comes down and gets you, and or whatever. There's two possibilities for whatever, like, because yeah, what you're describing with its, you know, being 3 feet tall with a round head and large eyes sounds like an alien, like a classic alien. So, okay, there's different sort of theories as to what could be happening there, that this is like a dream state thing, that it's happening on like the soul or the spirit level, but it's not really happening in the physical, and that there is like a spaceship that comes down. There are aliens that grab you and take you or whatever, but not physically. It's, you know, your being of light energy version of you that's happening too. That's kind of an interesting theory. And then the other one is that they are sort of like slightly out of phase with reality or our dimension. And then that's why we generally don't see them. But then there's my theory. So I love this. This is the other thing that comes up in almost every episode of the podcast. Is I think aliens, ghosts, and many types of cryptids, like things like Bigfoot, they're all different manifestations of the same type of phenomenon. I think the best way to put it is that aliens are some form of high energy ghost that seem to have more agency and more domain than a normal type of ghost does. That something about them allows them to interact with physical reality more, and us. But also they seem to affect us in similar ways that Bigfoot does and ghosts do, in that it seems to be a more subtle psychological and emotional effect than it does a physical effect. But we'll continue. There's a few more minutes left of this story.
Having sleep paralysis, but it's like I know that my eyes are...
Sorry, that was the other thing I was going to mention, is that what you're describing doesn't really sound like sleep paralysis. Some of the symptoms, some of the features are similar. But this is yet another thing that I remember we were talking about on the Discord one night, is different types of sleep paralysis. Because one little goofball character in there, Quintonic, he has mentioned a couple of sleep paralysis stories, or at least stories that sound perfectly identical to sleep paralysis, except with the one key difference that he was able to move. He got out of bed, ran to the light switch, and turned it on. And other than that, it sounded like a classic sleep paralysis story, which I just find bizarre. But what you're describing here, Kat, sounds more like an alien abduction. Straight up. It's way more typical. The fact that you could move, you did your little your chicken head thing to look around to see if you could get some sort of depth perception on it. You wouldn't have been able to do that if you were experiencing sleep paralysis. And by the time you can move, like, there's always a series of events, and the series of events ends with you being able to finally move. So usually whatever presence you feel is in the room with you will have disappeared before you regain the ability to move.
So close that I'm like kind of dreaming, you know. This was not a dream. It was literally real life, looking at this thing when I have never hallucinated, ever. Except for that time I had weed. But I was sober, and I was... yeah. So I told one of my friends, and he was like, well, if you actually saw something like that, then other people would be seeing things like that too, right? And I was like, well, how do you know that other people aren't? And then he was like, well, because there's no video recordings. I'm like, well, I didn't have a video recording. I wasn't gonna pull out my phone and take a picture. I was terrified. I just screamed and ran out of my bedroom. But then I was like, well, okay, I could record. I could go to bed, go to sleep, and take a video. Because I've noticed a trend, okay, when I'm in my bedroom alone, no cats in my bedroom, no lights on, I get sleep paralysis, and I hear something like moving around in my bedroom, and it's fucking really weird and scary. So I try not to put myself in that situation because it's always weird. And yeah, so with these, so what I could do is I could, right, go take a nap in my bedroom, lights off, no cats, door closed, record, like have before, like how in the other room I had a light on, so there was some light through the door so you could see. If the camera, because sometimes, you know, cameras don't have very good, sometimes cameras don't see as well as people in low light situations, so I'm not sure if it would actually pick up anything. But if I could try, if I could set all that up, then maybe I could catch something or something, because I have sort of done something like that before. A long time ago when I was in high school, I had set up my camera. I had set up my camera because I was curious, because I noticed I could do this thing where if I concentrated on what time I wanted to wake up from like a nap or whatever, if I concentrated on the time I wanted to wake up, then like a lot of the time I would wake up at that time, and it was really weird. And I was like, I don't know, I was just like curious, so I set up my camera, and right before I like went to sleep, I concentrated on what time I wanted to wake up, and I also prayed, because not a hardcore Christian, but you know, I'm not a fundamentalist Christian, but I do pray. And so yeah, so before my nap, I concentrated what time I wanted to wake up, and I prayed like, oh, I pray I'll wake up at this time. It sounds kind of silly, but yeah. So I did that, and then I went to sleep, and then I woke up at the time that I had thought of to wake up at, and I woke up at that time again, like how I had been able to do back then. And then I looked back at the video, and I got really freaked out, because at the time when I woke up, like right before I woke up, my body was like shaking, but it wasn't just like shaking, and it wasn't even just like twitching. It was like someone had grabbed me and was like shaking me, not just a little bit, but like actually, you know, almost I don't want to say violently, but you know, when you really are trying to get someone up, and that's what it looked like. And it was so freaky that I just like, I deleted the video, and I was just like so fucking creeped out, and I never tried to do that again, and I never recorded myself sleeping again. And I'm even more scared to record myself in this scenario where I'm having like, I'll get sleep paralysis, I hear something moving in my bedroom. My heater even turned off one time, and I heard the beep, because when my heater gets turned off, it beeps. And I was sleeping, but then I heard something moving in my room, and I heard the beep of the heater being turned off. And I woke up and my heater was turned off. And since these things happen whenever I am alone in my bedroom without my cats, with the door shut, with no lights on, considering that I've seen something freaky on camera before, maybe other people wouldn't think it's that creepy, but to me it was fucking creepy. So considering all that, I'm really, really scared to actually record myself, like sleeping in this, under those circumstances, because I'm fucking scared about what I might see. I mean, maybe nothing. And maybe it's nothing. I don't know. Maybe I had like a random, once in a lifetime, super real looking hallucination. Maybe. I don't really think so. And I am really scared to try to do that. But part of me like wants to, because I'm curious. And like if I actually got like something on camera, I mean, that would be amazing on one hand, but I'm really scared. Maybe I'll do it. I'll try and grow some balls for you, Greg. Anyway, so that's my sighting. That's it. Goodbye. I have a YouTube, Cat for Cats, and I think my name in the server group is Kitty Cat.
Yeah, that's right. Check out her, I guess it's a vlog channel. She has her own YouTube channel, Cat for Cats. Thank you very much for that story, Cat. That's a really, really good story. Yeah, wow. It definitely sounded like some sort of mix between some sort of poltergeist activity and some sort of alien activity, honestly. I don't even know how to pin that down. So I really hope you still have that video of you being violently woken up. I'm sure everybody in the server would love to see that. I'd definitely love to see that. That sounds fucking crazy. So, yeah, she describes how she was training herself to wake up with her internal clock, and she filmed herself waking up, and while she was waking herself up from a sleep, it looked like somebody grabbed her and started violently shaking her to wake her up. That's absolutely crazy. What I wonder, though, is I would almost wonder if that was not me doing that somehow stepping out of myself and physically doing that to myself. Because that's one of the possibilities with ghost activity that a lot of people have, discussed, is that sometimes poltergeist activity might be our own sort of untrained psychic telekinetic power or whatever energy, and it's being thrown off because of our emotional state or stress, or something's happening and we're just like throwing out these weird energies. And yeah, I think you said you were like asleep or half asleep or something when you heard the heater get turned off, for example. Maybe you were warm, so you stepped out of yourself and turned it off. Who knows? I mean, that's a much more comforting answer than you've got a fucking poltergeist alien ghost in your bedroom. Definitely, you're gonna have some trouble sleeping tonight. Thank you so much for that story. And then, okay, so Chronic, in the Discord here, he followed up with the whole Argentina thing, and he said that there's even more Germans and Dutch in southern Brazil, which is true. And then, let's see, Filthy Pete, the internet peasant. I love your name, bud. Hilarious. We haven't started on the tales of the pygmy, people who rode goats and went to war with cranes. Oh God, yeah, we're definitely gonna have to bring that up. That's crazy. And Kat in the Discord here says, I will try to brave enough to record. I'll try to be brave enough to record myself and see if I get anything. That'd be great, Kat. Thank you very much, and thanks again for the story. Yeah, how many more stories do I have up here? I have 3 more. You know what? I'm just gonna do them. I'm gonna do all 3. It's a weird lopsided episode. Okay. So Keg. Interesting. Hey, skeptic, you can call me Keg. Nice to meet you, Keg. So I know people usually send in ghost stories or maybe UFO sightings, but I have one that's a bit different. I still consider it a realm of paranormal, at least. The following story is a dream I had, which I saw the future. This Sorry, you know, guys, when I laugh at your stories, I'm not laughing at you. But, you know, laughter is a very natural reaction to being faced with absurdity and things that you can't process, so... It's also just fun. Sometimes I laugh when I'm having fun. And the idea of a dream of the future, God, that sounds fun. So this sort of thing happened to me maybe twice in my life. Though the second time I may potentially be able to explain it. The first, however, is pretty uncanny. Depiction of the day my dog died. Wow! Okay, so like you literally had a premonition dream of your dog dying. Let's get this. Let's read this. God, I wish there was somebody here that could read this story to me. Okay. The dream went as follows. My family and I were in the car, returning after what I felt like a long car ride to a house that looked familiar at the time of the dream, but was definitely not our home. For some reason, I couldn't quite place how I knew the house, possibly because the area around it was fuzzy, like it was plucked out of space and just dropped into a white void. We pulled our car into the garage, which was also strange since that's not something we normally do. Before my brother and I could get out of the car, however, my mom stopped us, informing us that our dog had passed away last night. We got out of the car, entered the home, and that was the end of the dream. At the time, it made me sad, but otherwise, it was a dream like any other, really. About a year later, my family and I went to visit my grandparents for Christmas and New Year's. My cousins live about an hour or so from my grandparents' place, so we usually go hang out with them whenever we visit. That's actually my favorite part of seeing my grandmother in Niagara Falls, is hanging out with all my cousins. Oh my God. They're all fucking crazy people. But that's why I love them. Can't wait to see you guys again. So anyways, we spent the night with them one night, and my parents came to pick us up in the next morning. On the ride home, however, I started getting a strange sense of dread and deja vu. After an hour of sitting in the car, we pulled up to my grandparents' house and pull into the garage. Just as we're getting out, of course, my mom stops us and tells us that our dog died while we were gone last night. And to this day, I can't really explain that dream. I did have another similar feeling dream in which I received a high school diploma about a year and a half before I actually got it. In the dream, I, for some reason, went down to this porch at the back of my high school to actually get the diploma itself rather than up on stage. That ended up being exactly where I needed to go to actually receive my diploma after my high school graduation ceremony. And I had no idea prior to the ceremony that this would be the case. But as mentioned previously, it's not much more, it's a much more lame story, since I can at least chalk that one up to the possibility of half paying attention when they went over how the ceremony would work, or maybe just forgetting that's what we were supposed to do. That is a really good point. That's still really interesting, though. I mean, having a dream that you're going to do it. I mean, that our subconscious, that's actually something that I'm trying to be much more aware of in my daily life. When an emotion comes over me that I don't understand or can't place, or maybe that I'm just uncomfortable with, or, you know, if I start to get a feeling about something, or start to get an inkling, or start thinking a way about something, and I can't really properly pin down exactly why or how I've come to that sense. I start to scour my subconscious, wondering what is it that my subconscious absorbed that I didn't consciously absorb? What is it that I saw, or I read, or heard, or smelled, or whatever the hell, that I would have just normally have ignored and not had a conscious thought about, that my subconscious went, oh, that reminds me of this, I'm now sad, or I'm now angry, or I now feel this opinion about this thing. And I mean, your subconscious speaks to you through your dreams. Like, people ask what dreams are. Ultimately, they're your subconscious processing information and communicating things to you. Like, if you're having a series of dreams that are like depressing dreams, that means you're probably depressed, and you're completely ignoring it. You're completely unaware of your emotional state, and your subconscious is trying to say, hey, you need to slow down and like deal with this because you're sad. And that manifests as, I don't know, you keep getting broken up with by a cute girl at the beach every night in a I don't know, some sort of thing that would make you sad in a dream. It's usually, that's the other thing. That's the really annoying thing about dreams, is that they're very rarely like a direct communication as to what is actually going on. Like, they'll often have the people that are involved in whatever your emotional distress are in the dream, right? But I mean, very rarely is it properly, literally communicated to you how it relates to reality, and in any way what the issue is that's being dealt with in the dream or communicated to you in the dream. Anyways, okay, I want to do at least one more. Okay. This one is from, excuse me, I'm not seeing a name, so I'm just going to use your first name here. This is from Ashley. All right. I love that I don't have to beg you guys for like any kind of, I don't know, denominational representation. That there's not like only men or whatever writing into this show. That I always get a nice mix of men and women. It's very nice. It's good to see. Okay, so I live near a place. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the show. I figured I'd share my creepy event. I live near a place called Happy Valley. There's a ton of lore on the place, most of them conflicting. Isn't that always the way, Ashley? Lore is always confusing in that way, though. But one thing that people agree on is the place is haunted as hell. Well, that sounds exciting. It's just one of those things that everyone sort of knows. The adults all warn the kids not to go up there at night. We tell the tourists, hunters, to be out, we tell the tourist hunters to be out before dark, and so on. Yeah, very good advice, I'm sure. Okay, so as a bit more background info on Happy Valley itself, there's a lot of conflicting lore about the place, and no one can even agree on dates for the place. That's really annoying. For somebody like me who's super hyper anal about doing research on history, and those are my two passions too, in historical places, is I love dissecting the history of a location, and I love hunting for ghosts at creepy historical locations. So, God, it's just those two passions, I feel, go hand in hand. I can't tell you how many other ghost hunters and ghost enthusiasts and stuff I've met that are also giant history nerds like me. Okay, so there are some ghost sites online that say it was abandoned in the 1930s, but most people who live around here insist that it's older, and point to the fact that the graveyard, the most recent date on the tombstone is 1841. Whoa, that's interesting. Also, interesting tidbit that there's about 30 graves up there that all have April 1841 as their death dates. Ooh, there must have been some sort of disaster, accident, disease, something happened there in April of 1841. 1841 is a really interesting date for the city I live in too. I don't know what, guys, but some shit went down in the early 1840s. Okay. So the graveyard, by the way, is one of the 3 sites in the valley itself. The graveyard, an old church, and an old one-room schoolhouse. Those one-room schoolhouses are so creepy, aren't they? The buildings are made of stone, and there's the ruined remains of a few old houses. But it's mostly a wall here, a foundation there, etc. Yeah, sounds like a really interesting ghost town. I definitely want to check it out. Yeah, Happy Valley. If you guys haven't Googled that yet, I'm definitely going to be Googling that by the end of the show, because I need to check this place out. So some people say that the town was decimated by a plague. Another popular rumor is that witches cursed the town after the mayor drove them out of the town. Others say that there was a huge confrontation between the Native Americans and the town, and that the Native Americans cursed the land. God damn. That's exactly like the Point Pleasant, West Virginia story where Mothman was. It's like big disagreement with the natives, and by disagreement it means that the white people totally fucking subjugated and lied to the natives to the point where the natives got frustrated and did something about it, and then you killed most of the natives, and then they cursed the land. That's usually what happens in a lot of these like paranormal town stories. So an interesting point, though, is that none of the Native Americans who live in the area, we have 4 different tribes within 2 hours of the valley in different directions, will go within 10 miles of the valley. Holy shit. Isn't that an interesting detail? God, I'm so glad I decided to read this story. I wonder why. That's got some Skinwalker Ranch energy to it, doesn't it? So I went to school with a few native kids, and neither of them, nor their parents, will go near it. When I asked one of my friend's moms, she just gave me a dark look and said, "Our people are smart enough not to go to cursed land." End quote. Wow. Wow, wow, wowie, wee, wah. One of the families actually sent their kids to the elementary school in the next town because their elementary school bordered on the valley. Holy shit. So this valley is legitimately haunted. Like, it's legit. This is legit. I talk about this a lot too, how much I trust and honor and respect these kinds of traditions from the natives in North America and South America. I absolutely trust that if they have these kind of apprehensions about being associated with or adjacent to or anywhere near this valley, that it means there is some sort of bad mojo going on there. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's more legends that go along with it. 4 kids being shot, a glowing skull with red eyes, but I can't find any first-hand knowledge of those events, or anyone who knows the people involved. It's all, my friend's dad, uncle knew the dad of the kid, and that sort of thing. Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's all stories and conjecture and scuttlebutt and rumor, and yeah, that's unfortunate. It'd be really, really, really cool if you could get your hands on some sort of legend or tale, or it would really, honestly, it sounds like it's one of those things where it's like you need to talk to an elder or a chief or something, because yeah, often native groups and native tribes will have that tradition where those sorts of things, they're not really supposed to talk about them, because talking about them gives power to them. So only the tribe leaders and elders and stuff are actually allowed to talk about it. Anyways, but again, I couldn't verify any of these things. Despite the legends, however, teenagers are stupid, and I was no different. Good to hear, Ashley. My cousin and I decided to go up and there around midnight, despite the fact that ignoring the warnings, we did follow one thing all the other generation said. All the older generation said. If you were to get stuck in the valley, supposedly the roads change and people have gotten lost in there all night, despite there being only 3 dirt roads. If that happens, throw pennies out the window. What the fuck? So, okay. Sorry if you didn't catch that just because of the way that she wrote it. It works really well for reading, but I don't know if me saying it out loud works as well. But what she's saying is that at night, when you're there, there's only 3 dirt roads, yet somehow at night there's some sort of curse or whatever where the roads change and people get lost in there. And then to alleviate that curse, you have to throw pennies out the window of your car. Okay. I wonder if that has more to do with copper than it has to do with the monetary value of the penny. Because copper is a conductive material. And I always say that these ghostly things, they're electromagnetic phenomenon, but hey, you're the one telling the story here. So despite the legends, however, yeah, teenagers are stupid. So, okay, so we were up there in my cousin's old Buick with a cup of full of pennies. Oh, I'm glad you went prepared. We headed up, taking the main road into the valley. About a half a mile down the road, we ran into an old church, supposedly built in the 1800s, although there's no documentation. And we saw very dim lights from inside. The place is blocked off and boarded up, so we were pretty sure nobody was inside. And I won't lie, I'm a chicken, and I immediately wanted to get the hell out of Dodge. My cousin, however, said we should keep going. About 30 seconds later, the car stalled out, but kept it moving. The road was flat, so we shouldn't have just stopped. But we kept rolling closer to the church. When we were directly in front of it, the radio clicked on, but it was only static. Oh my god, that'd be fucking terrifying. Car just randomly stalls for no reason on a flat road, and then when you get in front of the church, the radio turns itself on to static. Holy fuck. Oh my god. Okay, so my cousin tried to open his door, but despite the fact that they didn't appear to be locked. The door wouldn't even open. Eventually, the car rolled past the church, the radio clicked off, and the car turned back on. Wow. So at this point, my cousin was just as freaked out as I was. And we both agreed that we didn't want to risk going back past the church. So we decided that we'd keep going straight, and the road would come out the other side of the valley in a neighboring town. That's good logic. I would assume the same thing. Okay, is that what happened? There's more to the story. The valley isn't that big, about 10 miles square. But we drove for about half an hour. My cousin and I avoided looking at each other, as neither of us wanted to say it. Another half hour passed, and I rolled down the window and just started dropping pennies every few feet. We were doing about 15 miles an hour on an old dirt road, and about 5 minutes later, my cousin slammed on the brakes, and we were looking at the country road in the next town. This is such a good story. Wow. Especially if it's real. But you know what? I know I usually don't break the fourth wall on this, because there is the whole concept with this show that, just like Art Bell, it's like your story better be true, and if it's not true, it better be convincing. Well, if this story's not true, you are a fucking genius, because this story is so good. Okay, so we hauled ass back home, and neither of us had gone back in the 13 years since then. I do not blame you. There's more legends that go along with it. 4 kids being shot, a glowing skull with red eyes, etc. But I can't find any first-hand knowledge of those events, or anyone who knows the people involved. It's all my friend's dad and uncle and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I think you repeated that. So that's amazing. Holy shit. Wow. If this show has a story hall of fame, guys, we got our first nominee as an inductee into the Full Metal Tuxedo Hall of Fame. This story was 10 out of 10. God damn. And you know what? Let's finish this on a high note. It's already past our time anyways. Wow, I went on half an hour longer than usual. Good for me, right? And my voice isn't even dead yet, though I can definitely feel it starting to die. I'm having trouble getting into those baritones. Okay. So again, yeah, thank you to Samtar. Check out his music. Link in the description. Thank you to my patrons for joining in the chat. And thank you for the super chats. Let's see if I got any more super chats. I should have checked. God, do I not have my shit together tonight? So Moe's Dog, thank you for the super chat. Moe's Dog says, thoughts on a civilization that once lived in Antarctica before the last major tectonic shift. Okay, so there is this theory that under the ice of Antarctica are the remains of some sort of ancient civilization that existed there before the last physical either pole shift or last major tectonic shift. And I am 100% on board with that. There seems to be some sort of lore of there being people living in Antarctica. But I'm talking really long time ago. Like, probably even before Atlantis. Like, a long time ago. But, you know, I would want to do research before I get deeper into that. But there's also the possibility, too, that it wasn't that long ago. That it was closer to, like, 12,000 years ago when the Younger Dryas happened. And I would love to dissect that story, because I actually think that there's something to that. And Face Punch 1, thank you for the very generous super chat, says, Tinfoil helmet was awesome. Do you believe if we know our true history, everything we know would be turned upside down? Manipulation of history is definitely real, but to what degree? Thoughts? I don't say this to disparage people or scare people, but I mean, it is really scary when you think about it. But history is entirely a lie. And basically everything from the Romans everything starting from the Romans and before that, narrative-wise, is entirely untrustworthy. And even going into the Dark Ages, too. Because the Romans were famously history revisionists. They're probably the ones that burned down the Library of Alexandria intentionally. And yeah, they would often amalgamate cultures into their own and erase like the history of the culture that they amalgamated. Yeah, and then when those works were then translated during the Dark Ages, there's so much room for more revisionism into the translations and the restorations and the preservations. So it would be like, I'd love to have this really nice, concise answer. But it literally is going to take an entire series of videos just to give you an idea of just how incorrect history is. Like, wildly incorrect. It's like, there's no way to really describe it to you here. It will take watching Tinfoil Helmet for a couple years to really get an idea of it. But the way I usually put it is everyone is aware that history is in some way fabricated, but nobody seems to have even an idea of to what degree it is manipulated. Like, that's really the best way to put it, is that it's so much that you can't even imagine. Okay. Yeah, I think I've rambled enough tonight. Haven't I? Yeah, so Sir Hamilton says loves the longer podcast. Chronic says Antarctica used to be green. That's true. There's coal in Antarctica, which, like, mountains of coal, which can only have happened if there was a ridiculous amount of life on the island. So yeah, we know for a fact that there was life there. And Chronic also says, I love how hard he laughed at that, like a genuine one. Also, that was a really good story. Feels real. I agree. That was a damn good story, Ashley. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for watching, listening tonight. I had a lot of fun with you guys. My voice is gone. Oh, my God. My voice is just totally gone. I love you guys. Thank you so much. You are all legends. Goddamn champions. Thank you so much. Catch you next time. Probably be another 2 weeks. Saturday nights, usually between 9 and 9:30 Eastern Daylight Time during the summer. I don't really know what I'm going to cover next time. It might end up being some religious stuff. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Have a good night, everyone.
We'll be right back.